It's a challenging time for state's budget and for the nation. Negotiations are continuing with Iran even as it perpetuates the war in Syria. ISIL is expanding its territory and sphere of influence in the Middle East and North Africa, and Putin has again reneged on his commitments to solve the Ukrainian crisis. At the same time, China is rising, pressing for its own political and territorial advantages. In Africa, Ebola has caused nearly 10,000 deaths and remains a threat due in part to a lack of an adequate medical infrastructure and delivery system. So we have many challenges in the world, and I know that the State Department is at the forefront of trying to meet those challenges. The fact is that world history has taught us that no matter what the threat or challenge, dealing from a position of weakness is always a greater provocation than dealing from a position of strength. So I appreciate your total engagement, as evidenced by the fact that in 306 travel days, you've logged over 700,000 miles to 59 countries, and we'll be looking forward to being able to hear what we have accomplished in some of that travel. I just want to take one or two moments to talk about one or two issues as a framework. On Iran, I stand second to no one. You see my desire of a negotiated solution that rolls back and dismantles Iran's illicit nuclear program. But a deal that allows Iran to continue as a nuclear threshold state, gives it power, gives it relief from sanctions, potentially allows it to go from being a threshold to an actual nuclear weapon state is no deal at all. I'm very concerned about the news that is leaking from the negotiations, and that this entire deal will hinge on inspection and verification regimes while leaving Iran with a vast majority of its nuclear infrastructure. And in a much, if the facts, and we don't know whether they are facts or not, but if various reports suggest it, in a matter of time that is far less than anybody would have envisioned. On Cuba, I think the deal was one-sided. The regime has not changed tactics. In fact, it's flaunting its success in the negotiations. Last week's congressional visits, which didn't include any visits with human rights activists, political dissidents, or independent journalists, were followed by the arrest of more activists across the island. In Havana, 70 members of the Ladies in White were arrested. Several dozen more were arrested for accompanying them. Prominent civil society leaders, Antonio Rodiles, Angel Moya, as well as independent labor leaders Alexis Gomez Rodriguez and Pavel Herrera Hernandez were also arrested. On the same day, in eastern Cuba, over 90 activists from the Cuban Patriotic Union were arrested in Santiago. Another 13 ladies in white were arrested in Santa Cruz, along with Sakharov Prize winner Guillermo Fariñas. But that's not all. One of the ladies in white was actually splashed with tar. Clearly, the regime hasn't changed, and if anything, seems that they can do this with impunity, notwithstanding our engagement. And finally, on Ukraine, the most recent diplomatic efforts seem to have only emboldened Putin. Since Minsk II, there have been hundreds of ceasefire violations, and the city of Debaltseve has fallen under rebel control. Putin's forces now threaten Mariupol, which could provide a land bridge to Crimea, and his intentions are clear. On February 9th, the President said that providing lethal defensive weapons is one option being considered by his team. I look forward to hearing whether this option is more likely given the failure of Minsk II. It is something that this committee, in a bipartisan fashion, sent to the President, signed by the President. I hope that we will help the Ukrainians be able to defend themselves. You know, sending them night vision goggles and being able to see your enemy doesn't do very much for you if you can't stop them. And that's where we're at right now. I do want to say one very supportive thing, in addition to recognizing your most recent comments on Ukraine, which I applaud. For the past several years, I have complained, cajoled, encouraged, pleaded, and pushed in every way I know how the U.S. needs to direct additional resources to foreign policy priorities in our own hemisphere. And the budget request for Central America focuses on the right priorities and is a very good start. We need to work with these countries and help create opportunities, which is in our own national security interest. I look forward to discussing those and other issues with you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.